The Icebound Command, Part 3, The Frozen Treaty. The sky had been black since noon, a rolling bruise that never healed. You could smell the storm before it arrived, the iron tang of electricity, the hint of snow on the wind, and beneath it all the deeper smell of oak and tar and fear. The HMS Dauntless shuddered as the first squall struck her bow, and the deck heaved like a living thing. "Hands to storm stations!" My voice vanished into the gale, but the men moved anyway. They always did when the sea stopped being reasonable. Bare feet slapped on wet planks, canvas thrashed, and the air filled with the smell of hemp and panic. A young midshipman, Martin, barely 15, stumbled past me, eyes wide. "Sir, the lee braces!" "Then see to them." I grabbed his shoulder before he could vanish. "Breathe, think, the ship's not your enemy." Yet he nodded and ran, a shadow swallowed by rain. I envied him that simple fear. Mine was older and had learned my name. The wheel spun wildly until Quartermaster Bragg wrestled it back. His arms were rope and scars. He grinned through the sleet. "She'll hold, sir." "She's a good lass." "She's a stubborn lass," I said. "Good ones die young." The deck bucked again. Water poured over the lee scuppers, carrying a bucket, a coil of rope, and a sailor's dignity with it. Somewhere forward, a spar snapped. The sound was like bones breaking in God's hand. Through the lightning, I saw Collier clinging to the fore shrouds, hat gone, mouth open in a string of words the church would not approve. He had a line around his waist and another in his teeth. I loved him for it. Courage is rarely tidy. I ducked beneath the mizzen to the chart house. The lamp inside swung on its gimbal, throwing mad circles of light across the charts. The ink had run from damp. England itself looked like a bleeding wound. The compass needle jittered as though nervous. "Easy," I told it, absurdly. "We're all lost sometimes." Outside, the wind shifted without warning, punching the sails from the opposite side. The Dauntless lurched. A man screamed, the kind of sound you can never unhear, and then was gone. The sea gives no ceremony for its dead. Wren appeared beside me again, soaked, eyes wild behind his spectacles. "You know," he said, "if Providence meant us to float, he'd have made us hollow." "Speak for yourself," I said. "I'm mostly doubts and rum. Hollow enough." He barked a laugh and vanished back into the storm, coat flapping like the wings of some dark angel. Lightning tore the sky once more, and for that instant I saw the Dauntless entire. Masts bent, sails reefed tight, with men crawling along the yards like insects on a drowning beast. She was beautiful in her defiance. The sea could break her, but she would break back. I gripped the rail until my knuckles burned and whispered a promise I'd never admit aloud. "You'll not have her, not tonight." The sea had threshed itself thin. What remained was a grey so tight it squealed against the hull. HMS Dauntless drove through sleet that came like thrown gravel, her canvas hard as hammered tin, her rigging singing thinly as a bowstring. Orders went down the wind in splinters and came back whole. Lieutenant Samuel Harcourt had the deck. The bells struck and the sound ran along the deck like an insult carried by the wind. The leadsman's chant rose, steady as liturgy. "By the mark, 4, by the deep, 5. The ship shouldered east-northeast under double-reefed topsails, the sea trying to forget her as soon as she passed. "Hold her as she is," I said, speaking to the quartermaster and, by habit, to the weather. "Let the wind do the arithmetic." 40 fathoms, rising, came aft. "Very good." Dr. Nathaniel Wren appeared at my elbow, scarf iced to a pale stalactite. "If this is diplomacy," he said mildly, "I prefer war. War is noisier and therefore more honest." "War declares itself," I said. "Diplomacy waits in corners." The diplomatic sloop, a decent creature, all etiquette and nowhere to put a gun, kept station astern, her flag stiff with cold. In her cabin, a thin man with careful hair rehearsed phrases in 3 languages to sell the same cordial lie. Envoy halberd, trusting paper to do the work of iron. The companionway produced Captain Elias Godwin as if the ship had decided to make him visible again. He came on deck with that carved composure men mistake for serenity. "Mr. Harcourt," he said, "the lookouts have found new weather. French, sir." "Out of Trondheim," Godwin said, eyes north, as if the compass were a window into character. "If they catch the scent of our gentleman in the sloop, they'll dine on him and send the bones back to Whitehall with thanks." Wren, without looking away from the sea, said, "Perhaps the gentleman could promise them peace as well." "Doctor," Godwin replied, "peace is a flavoring. Nations take it to help the meat go down." Lightning spelt its childish alphabet across the low sky. Thunder took its time and arrived nonetheless. By dawn, the wind fell all at once and left the water pewter dull. The cliffs ahead, black and slick as cut obsidian. A fjord opened its mouth, rimmed with ice floes grinding like old men's teeth. "Shorten sail," I ordered. "We'll take her in cautious as a thief." The Dauntless slipped between stone and stone under small canvas, breathing in little sips. Every sound multiplied. A block creaked, and the echo brought cousins. The men went soft-footed as if the sea floor had ears. Godwin stood by the taffrail, hat brim needled with melt, lips shaping something between prayer and arithmetic. "They'll call this diplomacy," he said. "It smells like an ambush that has learned table manners." I did not answer. The water smelled of snowmelt and iron filings. The air tasted surgical. Far within, where the fjord forked into two black throats, a mast tip pricked the sky like a thought, then a second, then the suggestion of a tricolor that refused to be shy. "La Foudre," Godwin breathed, and the name moved through the ship with the particular quiet that means men have already believed it. Laroche had come himself with a consort tucked like a knife at his hip. The crew straightened in that invisible way, shoulders balancing, breaths finding the same length. A flag of truce lay folded on the capstan, as if ashamed of its occupation. The French sent a boat with a priestly white flag and the swagger of a cat that has mislaid its conscience and does not miss it. The officer who climbed our side was young and polished, and reminded me that Europe breeds too many handsome liars to keep count. "My Commodore sends cordiality," he said in careful English, "and suggests we complete our diplomatic mistake where the fjord divides. Two mouths, two ships, one misunderstanding." "Your Commodore has a taste for geometry," Godwin said. "Very well. A cable's length," I added. "We prefer not to smell your powder until obliged." The Frenchman showed expensive teeth. "We prefer not to waste it." They met where the fjord forked. La Foudre came up like a mirror in bad mood, spar to spar, muzzle to muzzle. The consort kept to larboard in the cliff shadow where boats may be hidden like statistics. Our diplomatic sloop bobbed astern, banners damp and idiotic with hope. A second French boat approached, awning spread, white flag demure as a debutante. In it, a man I had seen at 20 yards across iron and smoke, now suddenly near enough to see how ordinary he was. Commodore Laroche's face was unhandsome and therefore credible, eyes the color of pewter plate, mouth with a habit of concluding early. He stepped aboard with a fencing master's courtesy and wiped sleet from his hat brim as if the weather had been impertinent. "Captain Godwin," he said. "Mr. Harcourt," the North Bridge's acquaintance quickly. Godwin inclined his head with the faintest theatre. "Commodore, you have learned to repair quickly. Your ship looks almost apologetic." "La Foudre is vain," Laroche said. "She likes to present well for executions." Wren's mouth almost smiled. He refused, as a kindness. They laid papers on the capstan like blades crossing. Laroche shuffled ours with the impudence of a man who enjoys paperwork as a blood sport, tapped a signature with his glove. "This clerk," he said, "died last year." Whitehall forgets to let their ghosts rest. "We all draft with the dead," Godwin said softly. His eyes were bright with that dangerous form of lucidity that wears manners like a clean shirt. The ship flexed underfoot as the fjord breathed. In that same breath, the envoy halberd, who had stood 3 paces back polishing his smile, made a small coughing sound, as if discovering a fish bone in the air, and sat down very neatly. His waistcoat acquired a dark flower at the center. For a heartbeat, the deck became a sketch, lines without color, air without sound. Then noise exploded inward, the human, useless noise of men deciding whether to do stupid or sensible things. I shouted, "Hold! Hold! Hold!" The last came out like a bell that went along the planks and up through boots. Marines reached for safety catches and found restraint. Gun crews froze with tampions still kissing their muzzles. On La Foudre, a dozen men mirrored them. Laroche's hand raised and settled them with the economy of a metronome. Wren was already at the envoy's side, hands performing their quiet theater. Cloth, pressure, decision. He looked up and shook his head once, the little nod that religion gives to fact. Laroche's eyes remained on Godwin's. "If this is your signal to open," he said, almost friendly, "it is an ugly one." "If I had planned treachery," Godwin answered, gentle and appalled, "I would have staged it better." I turned, brain already living 3 minutes in the future. Marines to the waist. Bosun, quiet every mouth that is not holding a line. Quartermaster, keep her steady as a judge on Sundays. Ide, a porter, stood with a pistol in his hand and an expression that suggested he'd expected to wake from a better dream. "Give me the weapon," I said, voice like a warm blade. Ida swallowed. "Saw him with the French, sir, night before we sailed. On the dockhead, passed a letter." His conviction slid under his feet, and he looked down at the envoy, as if seeing him for the first time. "I thought he with a knife." "We have enough knives," I said. "Give it here." he did, fingers reluctant as nails coming out of old wood. Wren covered the envoy's face with a fold of his own coat. The sleet made a polite sound on the cloth. Laroche's gaze ticked to me and, annoyingly, warmed a fraction. "You are the one who keeps ships alive in ice," he said, not as a question. "I would rather duel you than obey politicians." "Your preferences remain decorative," I said. "We are leaving." "Smart," Laroche said, almost approving. "It will not matter." We walked the Dauntless like a lady at a crowded dance, crabwise, impudent, precise. Hidden boats under the larboard cliff found angles ruined and plans embarrassed. A musket snapped from a rock. A ball kissed the mizzen like a bee in a hurry. Godwin's hand clenched the rail, and his body leaned an inch into a command I refused to let him give. "Neutral shore," I said, not looking at him. "We will not write our court-martial for them." For a tight second, everything balanced on the blade of a single syllable. Then Godwin's jaw eased, and his gaze left the battery and traveled north, always north, as if he had already stored the shot for later. "As you say," he murmured, and for once obedience felt like the ship's idea. We slid down the fjord's throat into water that remembered the ocean and preferred it. Sails drew, lines found their song, and the men breathed all at once, as if some hidden conductor had brought them back into time. Behind, the cliffs resumed nursing their secrets. The Foudre paced at half a cable, respectful, a ghost attending a funeral, until the wind widened and even courtesy had to tack away. "Signal the sloop," I said. "Return with the body and the banners. Tell them our mission was interrupted by domestic error." "Is that the phrase?" Wren asked. "It will do," I said. Godwin had not moved far. His hat brim threw a small darkness over his eyes. Within it, concentration lived like a sin. "We will see him again," he said, and his voice held pity for the future. We bore away to clear water. The sea made its old speech, and the ship, like a decent parishioner, answered in the right places. That night the Aurora put up a ghostly curtain, green silk in a black cathedral, and the men who feared few things took off their hats. I wrote later at my small desk while the lamp tested itself against drafts. We parleyed. A fool killed our pen. We left with the page blank and blood-stained. I did not write the thought that kept returning. Laroche sees me too clearly, and Godwin has begun to see nothing else. In the morning, the calm that follows violence came down like frost. Repairs acquired their rhythm, splices, wedges, the medicine of order. Collier came with a face that wanted to please and hands that had learned the shape of work. "Sir," he said softly, "something you'd like to know?" He led me to the forepeak where a coil of hawser had remembered to look innocent. Beneath, wrapped in tarred sailcloth, lay a small chest the color of lies. Inside, signal books copied in a clerk's timid hand, sketch charts marked with lanes that did not officially exist, a sealed letter addressed to Commodore Laroche in the script of English administrations everywhere. "Who touched this?" I asked, as if the air might confess. Collier swallowed. "Mr. Green had the key to the locker an hour yesterday. The purser's clerk wrote it down, then drank too freely and forgot to be stupid. Find Green," I said. "Bring him without drama. If he resists, use a little." I took the chest aft. Godwin received it at the great cabin table with the calm of a man who has learned to stand still while fault arrives. He broke a seal, read 3 lines, and closed his eyes briefly as if bowing. "They make forgery tidy," he said, "so that when it is discovered the board can tidy us away with it." "There's more," I said. "A letter from London arrived with the cutter 2 nights gone. For me, it arms me with authority to relieve you for incapacity. If needed, I laid it down between us as if placing a blade by its point." Godwin's face performed a private theater and ended where dignity waits. "You will save the ship from me if I begin to love my enemy more than my duty," he said, not pleading. "But not before." "Not before," I said. Wren came with Mr. Green and the Marine Sergeant. Green looked at the chest, at the letter, and at the universe, trying its best to be patient. "There is more money in truth than in pay," he said quietly. "And truth remembers," Godwin said, and nodded to the Marines. "Put him where he can read nothing and speak to no one." The day went on, like work done in a church. Quiet, concentrated, men aware of what they'd survived and what they hadn't. In the last light, the sea went bruise purple, and the wind forgot us altogether. Wren joined me at the taffrail and offered a piece of salt pork wrapped in bread. "You will make yourself ill with being correct," he said. "Allow yourself a small mistake. It's good for the spleen." "I told the sloop to write domestic error in their book," I said. "If that is not a mistake, it is at least unfriendly." "Good," he said. "Let the truth have a friend for an hour." We were called below. The Admiralty packet drawer lay open on Godwin's desk, as if the furniture had decided to confess. Inside, nested with the neatness of a clerk's conscience, lay 2 blue-sealed envelopes. One wore the scuffs of weather and travel. The other had never left its mother's desk. "They sent us twins," Godwin said, almost amused. He broke the seal on the unborn one. Within, letters in French, written in a cultivated nobody's hand, describing shortages, disaffection, and a certain captain, Elias Godwin, to be provoked because he would chase shame and therefore glory through any weather. The letters were the kind the Admiralty likes to plant on enemy tables, so they may later describe the harvest as providence. "It is a trap for La Roche," I said, "baited with us. "And with you," Godwin said gently. "Because when these papers are discovered where they are meant to be discovered, someone will want your name to explain how they arrived." "Then they cannot arrive," I said. "No," Godwin said, "and yet we will carry them, because obedience has its own weather. We will carry them like a disease and not infect anyone." From the companionway came a sound like policy hurrying, the signal midshipman, cheeks reckless with news. "Sir, private lanterns on the dockhead. Hooded, unhooded, French rendezvous code, and," he swallowed, "a shore boat standing off the moorings. She is not navy." They went up into a night made of ink and the smell of iron. Across the water, against the shape of the world, a lantern spoke in 3s and 2s and silence. A smaller light, guilty and inland, answered. A boat moved in the lee of anchored hulks, as if the old ships had offered alibis. "Marines, waste, no noise," I said. "We will be polite burglars." The boat came like a thought men think when they believe themselves alone. Hands reached, hands answered. A chest changed ownership in that soft clunk that means something final has happened quietly. Marines attended to the donors with practical discourtesy. One went overboard and did not trouble us with a second splash. "Open it," Godwin said. He did not raise his voice. Authority does not always need to be loud. The lid gave. Inside, more signal books and charts, and like a stage prop placed by a playwright with a wicked sense of humor, another sealed letter to Commodore Laroche. "They are feeding him from our table," Wren said, not surprised and not calm either. A prisoner stood shivering among the Marines, cap off, hair flattened into contrition, the purser's clerk's accomplice, a clerk with a debt where his soul ought to be. "It wasn't treason," he said desperately. "It was wages. Wages are paid weekly," I said. "Treason pays at once, and then takes the rest of your life as interest." Godwin looked down into the chest, as if it contained a mirror he disliked. "Mr. Harcourt," he said softly, "you will put these where even the Admiralty cannot find them by accident. We will deliver to London precisely what London wishes to pretend never existed." "Aye, sir." The night shut its eye. The boat, emptied of purpose, idled into shadow. The lantern on the dockhead winked out, as if a hand had remembered shame. The bell on a buoy somewhere argued with itself in a melancholy minor key. I returned to my desk. I took up my pen and wrote as men confess. We left a fjord with a corpse and a courtesy. We carried home a chest of other people's intentions. We have been given twins to lose and told to be proud of them when they are found. I stopped because the quartermaster knocked with that particular economy, which means a letter has arrived that should not exist. The seal was cheap. The hand was tidy. The lines were as spare as winter. "Mr. Harcourt, there is a third blue packet, not a twin, not a duplicate, an impostor prepared in London by hands that wash themselves often. Its destination is La Roche's table. When it is found, your mission will be rewritten so neatly you will not be able to prove to yourself you remember it. If you can keep the sea between the packet and the man for whom it is staged, you may save lives I have not met. If you cannot, then be certain what you lose will be used to measure your loyalty. I underline will. I read it twice, and the cold came up from the paper into my fingers. I folded it once and placed it with the others in the drawer where I kept patience. I went back on deck to find the ship honest in the dark. Godwin stood there, hat off now, hair damp with night, looking north as if the compass had never been invented for any other direction. "Sir?" I said. "Mr. Harcourt," Godwin answered, and in his voice there was that small, terrifying warmth of a man who knows he is being saved and is not sure he deserves it. "We are going to war with our own story," he said. "Be certain you win." I looked past him, into the northern dark where the aurora had withdrawn its silk like a hostess closing a door. Somewhere beyond, a Frenchman with pewter eyes, read by lamplight, and planned to be necessary. Between here and there lay ice, weather, and a letter that should never arrive. "Round 2, I said, not boasted and not prayed. The wind heard and did not keep the words. Winds are careless with treasure. The Dauntless made a small, brave sound in her rigging and moved on. England lay somewhere astern with its tidy pens and obedient knives. Ahead, the ocean kept its old counsel. I put my hand to the rail where men put their hands when they pretend to reassure wood and are secretly asking to be reassured. I promised myself I would keep the sea between a lie and the man meant to swallow it. Below deck, in a drawer where Patience lived, Eleanor's letter lay with its calm, impolite truth. Above, the night allowed a single star and then thought better of it. The ship wrote her thin white sentence across the water and signed it with her name. When the watch changed and the bell told off the hour like a miser, I wrote one last line where none could read it and all might feel it. We are still here. Then I snuffed the lamp, went up to where the cold at least was honest, and listened to the dark consider what to do with us. The horizon did as it always does, kept its distance, exactly as far as hope